I'm Gianna, 28, female, and 10 years ago, my family labeled me an ugly high school grad and disowned me. It wasn't a dramatic, drawn-out affair with lawyers and official papers. It was a quiet, brutal severing, as clean and cold as a guillotine's blade. One day I had a family, a home, a future intertwined with theirs. The next, I had a suitcase, $200 my grandmother had slipped me for graduation, and a mother's voice echoing in my head, telling me I was no longer welcome. The reason? I didn't fit the picture. In the carefully curated photo album of the Rossi family, I was the picture that was unceremoniously torn out. My family's world revolved around a single glaring sun: appearance. My mother, Carol, was the high priestess of this religion of aesthetics. She was a woman who never had a hair out of place, whose nails were always perfectly manicured, and whose smile was a carefully calibrated tool she used to charm neighbors and intimidate rivals. My father, Robert, was her silent acolyte. A man whose spine seemed to have been surgically removed and replaced with a desire for a peaceful, conflict-free life, which meant agreeing with whatever Carol said. And then there was my sister, Brittany. 2 years younger than me, she was their masterpiece. Brittany was born with the kind of effortless, conventional beauty that my mother had always craved. She had blonde, sun-kissed hair, big blue eyes, and a bubbly personality that made her instantly popular. She was the golden child, the living embodiment of all my parents' hopes and dreams. I, on the other hand, was me. I had mousy brown hair that refused to hold a curl, braces that seemed to be a permanent fixture of my face, and a preference for books over makeup palettes. I was quiet, studious, and in my family's eyes hopelessly plain. A dud. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was the very air we breathed in our home. I remember one specific Christmas when I was 15. I had been saving for months for a new telescope. I'd circled it in the catalog, left hints, and dreamed of mapping the constellations. On Christmas morning, I received a set of slimming exercise DVDs and a gift certificate for a skincare consultation. Brittany, who had idly mentioned wanting a new handbag she saw a celebrity carrying, found a designer purse under the tree that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. When I tried to hide my disappointment, my mother patted my cheek and said, "A pretty face is a gift that keeps on giving, honey. Let's work on yours." My father just nodded, smiling vaguely at the festive decorations. Another time, in my senior year, I won a prestigious state-level award for a science project I'd poured my soul into. I came home, clutching the trophy, my heart soaring. My mother glanced at it, offered a tight-lipped "That's nice, dear," and immediately turned her attention to Brittany, who was in tears because a boy she liked had asked someone else to the spring dance. The entire evening was dedicated to consoling Brittany, strategizing how she could win the boy's attention, and planning a pick-me-up shopping spree for her the next day. My trophy sat on the kitchen counter, gathering dust and invisible shame. I learned a valuable lesson that day. My achievements were worth less than my sister's fleeting high school dramas. My intellect was a mild curiosity, her beauty was a family crisis. The final straw, the moment the thread completely snapped, came a week after my high school graduation. I hadn't blossomed into the swan my mother had hoped for. I was still an awkward 18-year-old with acne and a wardrobe that consisted of jeans and science club t-shirts. I had, however, been accepted into a top-tier university for computer engineering on a significant scholarship. I was proud. I thought, finally, this was something they couldn't dismiss. An achievement so concrete, so valuable that it would have to matter. I was wrong. The acceptance letter lay on the dining table. My mother picked it up as if it were contaminated. "Computer engineering," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Gianna, that's a boy's field. All those nerdy boys. You'll never find a decent husband in a place like that." "I'm not going to college to find a husband," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm going to get an education to build a career." "A career," she scoffed. "Your sister is going to community college for marketing. It's practical. She'll meet nice people. She understands that a woman's greatest asset is her charm and her ability to attract a successful partner." She looked me up and down, a familiar expression of deep, weary disappointment on her face. "Look at you, you haven't even tried. Your skin is a mess, your hair is just there. You're an adult now, a high school graduate, and you are an embarrassment. The word hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Embarrassment. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, staring in 10. TLY at the salt shaker. Brittany was painting her nails at the other end of the table, pretending not to listen, a tiny smirk playing on her lips. I'm sorry you feel that way, I whispered, my throat tight. I'm sorry too, she said, her voice turning hard. I'm sorry that after all these years you've turned out to be this. A plain, ugly high school grad with no ambition beyond hiding behind a computer screen. It's not the image this family wants to project. Brittany has a future. She has potential. We can't have you dragging her and us down. And that was it. The conversation escalated. I argued, I cried, I pleaded for my father to say something, anything. He just looked away, his silence a deafening confirmation of my mother's words. In the end, she delivered the final verdict. We've done all we can for you, she said, her tone final. It's time you made your own way. We need to focus our resources and our energy on Brittany. It's for the best. They gave me one night. I packed a single suitcase with my clothes, my books, and the few sentimental items I had. My father drove me to the bus station the next morning in complete silence, pressing $200 bills into my hand without making eye contact. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say, I love you. He just dropped me off at the curb and drove away, leaving me to watch his car disappear down the road. I was officially an orphan with living parents. For 10 years, that was the last I saw of them. 10 years of silence. 10 years of rebuilding my life from the ground up, brick by painful brick. I never called. They never reached out. I ceased to exist for them, and they, for all intents and purposes, ceased to exist for me. Until last Tuesday. Tucked between a tech magazine and a bill in my mailbox was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The calligraphy was elegant, the paper expensive. My address was written in my mother's flawless, looping script. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tore it open. Inside was a wedding invitation. Carol and Robert Rossi, together with the groom's family, request the pleasure of your company at the wedding of their daughter, Brittany Ann Rossi, to Mr. Mark Peterson. My breath caught in my throat. Brittany was getting married, and after a decade of complete and utter silence they were inviting me. It wasn't an olive branch, I knew my mother better than that. It was a summons, a command performance. A way to show off their successful daughter and her doubtlessly wealthy new husband. I was probably invited to fill a seat or perhaps as a cautionary tale for other relatives. Look, there's the strange, disowned daughter. Behave or you'll end up like her. I should have thrown it in the trash. I should have burned it. But I didn't. I placed it on my sleek, minimalist kitchen counter and stared at it. 10 years, a lifetime had passed, and a small, dangerous spark of curiosity ignited within me. I wanted to see them. I wanted to see what a decade had done to their perfect world. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted them to see what it had done to me. The first year was the hardest. The $200 from my father and the $200 from my grandmother vanished with alarming speed, swallowed by a deposit on a tiny, grim apartment near campus, and the cost of textbooks that my scholarship didn't cover. I was 18, utterly alone, and adrift in a world that felt vast and indifferent. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant, hollow feeling in my chest. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling of my room, and the silence would be so profound that I could hear my own heart beating, a frantic, lonely drum. I got a job washing dishes in the university cafeteria. The work was grueling, the smell of grease and stale food clinging to me long after my shifts ended. My hands were perpetually raw and chapped, but the exhaustion was a strange kind of blessing. It left me with little energy to dwell on the family I had lost. My life became a simple, repeating loop. Wake up, attend lectures, go to my shift, study until my eyes blurred, sleep for a few hours, and repeat. Computer engineering was my sanctuary. In the world of code, logic reigned supreme. There were no subjective judgments, no arbitrary standards of beauty. A line of code either worked or it didn't. A problem had a solution if you were smart enough and persistent enough to find it. It was clean, it was fair, and it was the complete opposite of the home I'd been exiled from. I threw myself into it with a desperate intensity. While other students were at parties, I was in the computer lab, wrestling with complex algorithms. While they were forming social circles, I was building a relationship with languages like C++ and Java. They were my friends, my confidants, my escape. Slowly, things began to change. My professors noticed my dedication. A teaching assistant, a kind graduate student named Ben, saw that I was struggling to balance work and my advanced coursework. He recommended me for a paid internship at a small software startup run by one of his former classmates. It was my first real break. Suddenly, I was no longer washing dishes. I was writing code that would be used in a real product. I was part of a team, valued not for my appearance, but for my mind. That internship was the first brick in the foundation of my new life. I graduated from college with top honors and a job offer from a mid-level tech company. For the first time, I had a steady income. I could afford a decent apartment, one without stained ceilings or peeling paint. I could buy clothes that weren't from a thrift store. And as my financial stability grew, something else began to blossom: confidence. Ugly high school grad was still there, a ghost that whispered insecurities in my ear late at night. But her voice was getting fainter. With every successful project, every line of elegant code I wrote, every word of praise from a manager, I was building a new version of myself. I started taking better care of my physical self, not because my mother's voice was haunting me, but because I was starting to feel like I was worth the effort. I found a dermatologist who helped clear up my skin. I discovered a haircut that actually flattered my face. I started working out, not to become slimmer, but because the endorphins cleared my head and made me feel strong. My career trajectory was steep. I was relentless. I absorbed information like a sponge, stayed late, and took on the most challenging projects that others shied away from. Within 5 years, I was recruited by Apex Innovations, one of the biggest names in the tech industry. It was like being called up to the major leagues. The work was demanding, the pressure immense, but I thrived on it. I was promoted to a team lead, then to a senior architect. I was designing the backend systems for applications used by millions of people worldwide. On the side, fueled by caffeine and a personal frustration with inefficient project management tools, I started developing my own application in my spare time. It was a passion project, something I built for myself. I called it Synapse. A friend in the industry saw it, was blown away by its intuitive design and powerful features, and convinced me to release it. To my astonishment, it took off. Small businesses loved it. Other developers praised its clean architecture. Within 2 years, Synapse had become a significant player in the productivity software market, generating a stream of passive income that was far from passive. It was through Synapse that I entered a new world, the world of tech summits, investor meetings, and industry panels. I was no longer just Gianna Rossi, the coder. I was Gianna Rossi, the founder of Synapse. People wanted to hear what I had to say. They respected my opinion. And it was in this world that my transformation became complete. The shy, awkward girl was gone, replaced by a confident, articulate woman who could command a room. I learned to dress the part, not in the frilly, feminine way my mother would have approved of, but in a style that was my own. Sharp, minimalist, elegant power suits and tailored dresses. I built a life for myself, a good life. I had a beautiful condo overlooking the city, a close-knit circle of friends who valued my loyalty and intellect, and a career that challenged and fulfilled me. The gaping wound left by my family had scarred over. It was still there, a part of my history, but it no longer ached with the same intensity. So why, after all this, did I even consider going to that wedding? I asked myself that question 100 times as I stared at the invitation. Part of it was, admittedly, a morbid curiosity. I wanted to see them. I wanted to see the perfect family in its natural habitat. But there was something deeper, too. For 10 years, they had existed in my mind as giants, their judgment a colossal shadow that I had been running from. Their words, ugly, embarrassment, had been the driving force behind so much of my ambition. I had built this entire life, this fortress of success, in defiance of those words. Going back was not about seeking their approval. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would never get it, nor did I need it anymore. Going back was about facing those giants and realizing they were just people. Flawed, cruel, and ultimately small-minded people. It was about showing myself that their shadow had no more power over me. I wasn't going for them. I was going for the 18-year-old girl they left at the bus station. I was going to stand in front of them as the woman she had become, and in doing so, finally set her free. With a steady hand, I picked up my phone and booked a flight. Then, I opened my laptop and RSVP'd, yes. The week leading up to the wedding was a strange mix of calm focus and roiling anxiety. At work, I was the picture of compete. NCE, leading my team through a complex system migration with unwavering precision. I broke down problems, delegated tasks, and navigated corporate politics with the ease of a seasoned pro. But at night, alone in my condo, the carefully constructed walls of my professionalism would crumble. The ghost of the girl I used to be came visiting. I'd catch my reflection in the dark glass of my living room window, and for a split second, I wouldn't see the 28-year-old software architect. I'd see the awkward teenager with the ill-fitting glasses and the permanent look of apology on her face. The old insecurities, the ones I thought I had buried under layers of success and self-worth, began to stir. What if they were right? What if, underneath the designer clothes and the fancy job title, I was still that same girl? The biggest battle was waged in front of my closet. What does one wear to the wedding of the sister who stood by and watched as you were cast out of your family? The temptation to go for shock value was strong. I could wear something outrageously expensive, a dress that screamed, "I'm more successful than all of you combined." I imagined their faces, the flicker of greed and envy in my mother's eyes, but the thought left a sour taste in my mouth. That would be playing their game, using wealth and appearance as a weapon, just as they had always done. It would be a validation of their entire worldview. No, I had to wear something that was for me. Something that represented the woman I had become, not the one I was in opposition to. After hours of deliberation, I chose a dress. It was not flashy. It was a deep sapphire blue, the color of the twilight sky. The cut was architectural, almost severe in its simplicity, with clean lines, a high neckline, and long sleeves. It was modest, yet the quality of the fabric and the precision of the tailoring gave it an undeniable presence. It was a dress that communicated quiet confidence and unshakable self-possession. It was a dress that said, "I am not here to compete. I am here to observe." I booked a room at a boutique hotel a few miles from the wedding venue, a sprawling, opulent country club. I had no intention of staying with any relatives, even if they had offered, which they hadn't. I needed a neutral space, a sanctuary I could retreat to when the inevitable emotional storm hit. The night before the flight, I called my friend Maria. She was a brilliant graphic designer I'd met a few years ago, one of the few people who knew the full story of my past. "Are you sure you want to do this, G?" she asked, her voice warm with concern. "You don't owe them anything, you don't have to prove anything." "I know," I said, pacing my living room. "I don't think I'm going to prove anything. I think I need to see it for myself. I need to close the book. Right now, there's still these mythical figures in my head. The all-powerful parents, the perfect sister. I need to see them as they are." "Just people," Maria finished for me. "Exactly, just small, petty people at a wedding." "Okay," she said, sensing my resolve. "Then just remember who you are. You are Gianna Rossi. You built an empire from scratch. You are brilliant and kind and strong. Don't let them, for 1 second, make you forget that." Her words were a balm. I held on to them as I packed my bag. The sapphire dress, a pair of simple but elegant heels, my laptop, just in case, and a well-worn copy of a Stoic philosophy book. A little armor for the soul. The flight was short. As the plane descended, I looked out the window at the landscape of my childhood, a place I hadn't seen in a decade. It looked smaller, less significant than I remembered. The feelings I expected, a wave of nostalgia, a pang of loss, didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were a tourist visiting a foreign land. I picked up my rental car, a sleek, unassuming sedan, and drove to the hotel. After checking in, I stood under the hot spray of the shower for a long time, washing away the grime of the journey and preparing myself for the one that was still to come. As I got ready, I did my makeup with a steady hand. It wasn't the mask of paint my mother and sister favored, but a subtle enhancement, enough to even out my skin tone and define my eyes. I pulled my dark hair back into a low, elegant chignon at the nape of my neck. Finally, I slipped into the sapphire dress. Looking at my reflection in the full-length mirror, I saw no trace of the insecure girl from 10 years ago. I saw a woman, a stranger to my own family. My heart was pounding, a frantic, trapped bird in my chest, but on the surface I was calm. I took a deep breath, grabbing the small clutch that held my phone, my room key, and my car keys. I was ready. The drive to the country club was surreal. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across perfectly manicured lawns. Luxury cars filled the parking lot. I found a space at the far end, wanting to keep my arrival as low-key as possible. For a long moment, I just sat in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, the engine silent. This is it, I thought. The end of the book. All I had to do was walk inside and turn the final page. With a resolve that felt both terrifying and liberating, I got out of the car and started walking towards the grand entrance, my heels clicking softly on the pavement, a solitary ship sailing into the heart of a storm I had been avoiding for 10 years. The air inside the country club was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Soft music drifted from a string quartet tucked into an alcove of the grand foyer. Guests mingled, their laughter echoing off the marble floors and high, vaulted ceilings. It was a scene of carefully orchestrated perfection, my mother's vision brought to life. I felt like a glitch in the matrix, a piece of code that didn't belong. I lingered near the entrance, using the guest book as a shield while I scanned the room. It didn't take long to find them. They were holding court near the grand staircase, a perfect family unit at the center of their universe. My mother, Carol, was radiant in a champagne-colored gown that was just a little too youthful for her. She was beaming, her hand resting possessively on the arm of a handsome, dark-haired man I assumed was Mark, the groom. My father, Robert, stood beside her, looking pleased and slightly overwhelmed in his tuxedo. And Brittany. Brittany was a vision in white. Her wedding dress was an elaborate creation of lace and tulle, sparkling under the crystal chandeliers. Her blonde hair was styled in intricate curls, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, every bit the golden child she had been raised to be. They were a tableau of success and happiness, and for a moment, the old, familiar feeling of being on the outside looking in washed over me. I took a steadying breath, reminding myself of Maria's words, "You are Gianna Rossi." I straightened my shoulders and began to walk forward. I decided not to approach them directly. Instead, I made my way to the bar at the far side of the room, ordering a glass of sparkling water. I wanted them to see me first. I wanted to gauge their reactions from a safe distance. I leaned against the bar, sipping my water, and waited. It was my father who saw me first. He was scanning the crowd, a polite, vacant smile on his face when his eyes landed on me. The smile froze, then melted away, replaced by a look of pure, slack-jawed shock. He blinked as if trying to clear his vision, and his face paled. He nudged my mother, whispering something in her ear. Carol's head snapped in my direction. Her perfectly painted smile vanished instantly. Her eyes narrowed, and a frown line appeared between her brows, a tiny crack in her flawless facade. She scanned me from head to toe, her gaze clinical and critical. I could almost hear her internal monologue, the simple dress, the severe hairstyle, the lack of ostentatious jewelry. She was taking inventory, assessing the threat. I saw not a flicker of maternal warmth, no hint of joy or even surprise at seeing her long-lost daughter. There was only disapproval and a cold, calculating appraisal. I held her gaze, my expression neutral. I didn't smile, I didn't wave. I just looked back at her, letting the silence stretch across the crowded room. I could feel the power dynamic shifting. I wasn't the frightened child cowering under her glare anymore. I was an adult, a stranger, meeting her gaze as an equal. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she turned away, whispering furiously to my father. A few minutes later, an aunt I barely remembered, Aunt Patricia, was dispatched. She scurried over to me, her face a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. "Gianna, is that really you?" she chirped, her voice a little too loud. "Hello, Aunt Patricia," I said calmly. "My goodness, we weren't sure you were coming. It's been so long. You look different." She didn't say good, she just said different. It was the family way of delivering a backhanded compliment, or perhaps just stating a fact without committing to an opinion. 10 years is a long time," I replied smoothly. Her eyes darted back towards my mother as if seeking instructions. "Well, it's lovely to see you. Brittany is so beautiful, isn't she? We are all so proud. Her new husband, Mark, he's a wonderful man, very successful. Venture capital, you know." She said the words venture capital with an air of reverence, as if it were a title of nobility. "I'm sure he is," I said, taking another sip of my water. The conversation died a quick, awkward death, and Aunt Patricia beat a hasty retreat back to the safety of the family nucleus. The whispers started then. I could feel the eyes on me, the sideways glances from cousins and old family friends. I was the ghost at the feast, the family skeleton who had just walked tea of the closet and ordered a drink. I ignored them. I found a quiet corner and simply observed. I watched Brittany laugh and preen for the photographer. I watched my mother network with the groom's wealthy-looking family, her charm turned up to its highest setting. I watched my father stand awkwardly at the edge of conversations, nodding and smiling when required. Nothing had changed. It was the same dynamic, the same priorities, just on a grander, more expensive stage. And as I watched, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The anxiety that had been churning in my stomach began to dissipate. Maria was right. They were just people. Their power over me was an illusion I had helped create by staying away, by letting them live as infallible titans in my memory. Seeing them now in the flesh, they seemed so ordinary. Their obsession with image, which had once felt like a suffocating force of nature, now just seemed sad. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't see them approaching. Brittany, holding a glass of champagne, was leading her new husband by the hand, making the rounds to greet guests. Mark, the groom, looked handsome and happy, if a little tired of the endless smiling. They were heading in my direction. My heart gave a single, hard thump. The moment was here. Brittany saw me when she was only a few feet away. She stopped so abruptly that Mark, who was looking the other way to greet someone, nearly bumped into her. The radiant bridal glow on her face flickered and died, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, quickly followed by a flash of irritation. It was clear this was a reunion she had not been anticipating, or at least, not like this. Not with me looking calm and composed in my quiet corner, and certainly not while she was attached to her prized new husband. "Gianna," she said, her voice a tight, hushed whisper, "what are you doing here?" It wasn't a question of welcome, it was an accusation. "You invited me, remember?" I replied, my voice even. I held up my clutch as if the invitation were tucked inside. Mark turned, his polite guest greeting smile still in place. He looked from his new wife's tense face to mine. He clearly had no idea who I was. He saw a well-dressed woman, a stranger. He extended a hand, his manners impeccable. "I'm Mark Peterson," he said warmly. "I don't think we've met." Before I could respond, he glanced at Brittany, a slight, questioning frown on his face. He could feel the tension radiating from her. "Honey, you know her?" he asked, his tone light and curious. This was the moment. The scene that had played out in my head in 1,000 different ways over the past week. Brittany's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Humiliation, anger, confusion. She opened her mouth, probably to dismiss me as a distant, unimportant cousin, to minimize my presence and shuffle her husband along. But before she could get a single word out, Mark's expression changed. His eyes, which had given me a polite, cursory glance, now focused on my face with dawning recognition. His smile faltered, replaced by a look of genuine surprise and respect. Wait a second, he said, his eyes widening. He dropped his hand and took a half step closer. I do know you, you're Gianna Rossi, from Apex Innovations. You developed Synapse. The air crackled. The name of my company, my creation, spoken aloud in this place, felt like a thunderclap in the carefully controlled atmosphere. Brittany froze, her mouth slightly agape. Mark's entire demeanor shifted from that of a groom meeting a random guest to a professional meeting a peer he admired. Wow, he said, a genuine, unaffected smile spreading across his face. I can't believe it, I'm Mark Peterson from Northgate Ventures. We met at the Tech Summit in San Francisco last year. I saw your keynote on scalable architecture. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. My team and I talked about it for weeks. My family had been banished to the periphery. In this moment, I was not Brittany's sister. I was not Carol and Robert's discarded daughter. I was Gianna Rossi, the founder of Synapse. I felt a slow, warm wave of vindication wash over me. It wasn't triumphant or gloating. It was quiet and deeply, profoundly satisfying. I smiled, a real smile for the first time that evening. It's good to see you again, Mark. I remember. You asked a great question about monetizing open-source platforms. That's right, he said, clearly thrilled that I remembered. Brittany, honey, this is Gianna Rossi. She's a legend in the software world. Synapse is one of the most elegant pieces of productivity software on the market. We almost invested in her last funding round, but we weren't fast enough. He turned back to me. What on earth are you doing at our wedding? The question hung in the air, aimed at me but ricocheting directly at my sister. Brittany looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her face was ashen under her expensive make. All the power, all the attention had been stolen from her, on her day, by the sister she thought she had left behind in the dust. I let the silence stretch for a beat, savoring the exquisite irony of the situation. Then, I turned my gaze from Mark to my sister, my expression calm and unreadable. I looked directly into her shocked blue eyes. Brittany and I said, my voice clear and carrying just enough to be heard by my parents, who were now hovering a few feet away, their faces masks of horror. Oh, we go way back. I paused, letting the weight of the unspoken history fill the space between us. Then I delivered the final, quiet blow. I know her more than you think. Mark looked back and forth between us, his brow furrowed in confusion. He was smart enough to know that something significant was happening, but he couldn't possibly grasp the decade of history packed into that single, loaded statement. He saw a successful tech founder and his new wife, who were apparently old acquaintances. My family, however, understood everything. They saw their carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of appearances and secrets, cracking right down the middle. They saw the ugly high school grad they had thrown away, standing before them not as a supplicant, but as an equal to their prized son-in-law, a legend in his world. The judgment they had passed on me 10 years ago had just been rendered utterly, publicly, meaningless. And the look on my mother's face, a mixture of incandescent rage and abject humiliation, was all the closure I would ever need. The bubble of our confrontation burst as quickly as it had formed. Mark, though clearly bewildered, was a man skilled at navigating awkward social situations. He clapped his hands together with forced cheerfulness. Well, what a small world. The tech community is practically a village, he said, trying to smooth over the palpable tension. He gave Brittany's arm a squeeze. Honey, we need to keep circulating. It was amazing to see you, Gianna. We should definitely connect on LinkedIn. I'd love to pick your brain about your next project. He guided a still silent, shell-shocked Brittany away, leaving me alone in my corner. But I wasn't alone for long. The shockwaves had reached my mother. She strode towards me, her movements stiff with fury. My father trailed behind her like a dinghy caught in the wake of a battleship. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, her voice low and venomous. She maneuvered us slightly, shielding our conversation from the view of the other guests. Her smile was plastered on, but her eyes were like chips of ice. I'm attending a wedding I was invited to, I replied, my voice steady. I refused to be drawn into a shouting match. My calmness was my shield and my sword. You are trying to ruin your sister's day, she accused. Coming here, flaunting your, whatever it is you do, that was a calculated performance to embarrass her in front of her new husband. I almost laughed. The irony was breathtaking. She, who had orchestrated my entire childhood around performance and appearance, was accusing me of being calculated. A performance, I said, raising an eyebrow. I had a simple conversation with a man I've met before. He happens to be your son-in-law. I didn't plan that, Mother. In fact, I had no idea who Brittany was marrying until I read the invitation. The only thing I'm guilty of is not remaining the failed embarrassment you expected me to be. Her face contorted with rage. You were always like this, arrogant, ungrateful, thinking you were better than us with your books and your science fairs. We gave you everything. You gave Brittany everything, I corrected her, my voice still quiet but now edged with steel. You gave me a bus ticket and a character assessment that I've spent the last 10 years proving wrong. You didn't give me anything, you threw me away. And you know what? It was the best thing you ever did for me. You forced me to rely on myself, on my mind, on my work ethic, all the things you thought were worthless. Everything I have, I built myself. Not with a pretty face, or by charming a wealthy man, but with this. I tapped my temple lightly. The one thing you could never understand or value. My father finally spoke, his voice weak and pleading. Gianna, please, not here, not today, can't we just be a family? I turned to him, and for the first time I didn't feel anger, just a profound pity. A family? I asked. When were we ever a family, Dad? Were we a family when you sat in silence while Mom told me I was an ugly embarrassment? Were we a family when you drove me to the bus station and left me there without a backward glance? This isn't a family. It's a brand you've been managing, and I was discontinued. You don't get to ask me to be a family now just because my presence is inconvenient for your brand. He flinched as if I'd slapped him, his face crumbling. He had no defense, and both knew it. My mother, realizing she was losing control, played her final card. I want you to leave, she commanded. Leave right now, you've done enough damage. I looked at her, at the desperation behind her rage. She wasn't an all-powerful matriarch. She was a frightened woman, terrified that the perfect image she had spent a lifetime curating was about to shatter. And in that moment, I knew I had won. Not by fighting, but by simply surviving and thriving. No, I said softly. I don't think I will, I'm a guest. I will stay for the dinner I RSVP'd for. I will be polite and discreet. But I will not be ordered out of here like a misbehaving child. That person doesn't exist anymore. I turned my back on them then, a gesture of finality, and walked away, leaving them standing there, speechless and defeated. I found my assigned table, which was, unsurprisingly, tucked in the back corner with a collection of distant cousins and my flustered Aunt Patricia. I sat down, unfolded my napkin, and waited for the salad course. The conversations around me were stilted, but I didn't mind. I ate my dinner in quiet contemplation. The food was delicious, but it was the taste of freedom that I truly savored. I didn't stay for the dancing. After the cake was cut and the last of the formal speeches were made, I knew my purpose for being there was complete. I had faced the giants and found them to be mortals. I had closed the book. There were no more pages to turn. As I was discreetly making my way toward the exit, a voice called my name. Gianna, wait. It was Mark. He had managed to slip away from the festivities and looked both exhausted and deeply curious. Brittany was nowhere in sight. I'm sorry about all that, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the main hall. I feel like I walked into the middle of a movie. I gave him a small, tired smile. It's a complicated family history, Mark. You didn't do anything wrong. She never mentioned you, he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. In all the time we've been together, she never once said she had a sister. I let that sink in. It was a confirmation of what I already knew. In their world, I had been completely erased. It's probably for the best that you hear the story from her, I said, offering him an exit from the conversation. It wasn't my place to detonate his new marriage. That was Brittany's mess to manage. He nodded, looking grateful. Right, of course. He paused, then looked at me with that same professional respect from before. Seriously, though, your work is incredible. If you're ever looking for a new round of funding or just want to talk strategy, my door is always open. Northgate Ventures, you have my card. He'd somehow managed to slip it into his tuxedo pocket. Thank you, Mark, I said, taking it. I appreciate that. Take care of yourself, Jayana, he said, and with a final, searching look, he turned and walked back into the bright, noisy room to rejoin his wife and his new, complicated family. The drive back to my hotel was quiet. The night was dark, the road ahead illuminated only by my headlights. I didn't feel triumphant, I didn't feel angry, I felt light. The heavy cloak of the past, the one I had been carrying for 10 years, had finally been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, what they did was not forgivable. It was release. I was released from their judgment, from the need to prove them wrong, from the shadow of their expectations. My success was my own, not a reaction to their rejection. My life was my own, built on a foundation they could never touch. Back in my hotel room, I took off the sapphire dress and hung it carefully in the closet. I washed the makeup from my face and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw Jayana. Not the ugly grad, not the disowned daughter, not the tech legend. Just Jayana. A 28-year-old woman who was tired but whole. I knew I would never hear from them again. The brief, shocking reappearance of the family ghost would be a story they would bury, a secret they would keep even more fiercely now. Brittany would have to explain to her husband why she had lied by omission for so long. My mother and father would have to live with the knowledge that the son-in-law they prized so highly admired the daughter they had deemed worthless. Those were their burdens to carry, not mine. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove to the airport. As my plane took off, I looked down at the shrinking landscape one last time. I felt no connection to it, no sadness. It was just a place, a chapter in a book that was now finished. My home was a condo in a city hundreds of miles away. My family was a circle of friends who loved me for my mind and my heart. My future was a blank page, waiting for me to write it. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt completely and utterly free. So Reddit, am I the jerk for showing up at my sister's wedding and inadvertently revealing my success to her new husband after being disowned for a decade? Part of me feels a quiet satisfaction, but another part wonders if I should have just stayed away. Either way, I don't regret it. It was the closure I never knew I needed.